This project is kind of like my dirty little secret. For God knows how long, I've had this old motorcycle decoration that I bought a while ago with the plans of modding it into a work of art. And eventually, I just kept stacking stuff on top of it, bits and bobs, things I'd found in the trash, an old model kit that I'd bought a while ago for a car that I also had no plans on actually completing and just had it set aside. And eventually, it just turned into this big blobby mess. And with that blobby mess, I decided I'm gonna try and make an original work of art out of it. Little disclaimer too, I don't know if the decoration was like a handmade work of art that another artist made. There's no signature on it that I could find, and it looks like it was batch made from a mold. So if it is someone's original work, I'm really sorry. I had no idea. But seeing as how the piece was just sitting ready made on my desk waiting to be finalized, I just thought I'd pick it up and make something out of it. So obviously when I started it, I had completely different intentions than I do now. I think I started it with the hopes of it being a kind of like Mad Max Fury Road or post-apocalyptic vehicle with, I think, a woman on it with zombie killing mechanisms on the side. But then while I started working on it, it just kind of turned into like a big trash cycle, and my hopes for the trash cycle kind of shifted when I made the little turret on the back there. The size of it implied that whoever would be on it would have to be really small, and then immediately I thought goblins, and then I thought, okay, so it's a trash cycle war bike for goblins, and my mind was set. You'll see on the back there too, one of the controls is a fork. That's an old Lego fork that I just stuck on the back there. So it's definitely supposed to feel like a haphazard, messy bike, and that's why I painted it like it was sitting in a trash yard for God knows how long. And that's what a lot of the fun was for me, was painting it to be kind of messy, because there's obviously like no rhyme or reason to what I put on this bike. I just put anything and everything on it because I discovered scratch building and I thought it was really fun. And this is obviously my first attempt, so it's messy, and I'm gonna say it's messy on purpose, but it's just messy. So because the bike is supposed to be purposefully kind of trashy, the paint job's pretty straightforward. I picked a base color. It really should have been black because it would have hidden all the hidden recesses I couldn't reach with a brush. I picked up like a turquoise color because I kind of like the retro feel of that color. I then just kind of set about dirtying it up. So you saw me put a black wash on it, then kind of a light rust color, and then I kept going over with lighter blues to try and get the details back, because every time you add a wash it gets darker and darker. I dry brush on some silver to try and see the metallic bits a bit better, and then I kind of discovered halfway through that I didn't like how clean it was, and then I dirtied it up again, and then I didn't like how dirty it was, so I went over it again with a lighter color. But I tried to fix the rust situation this time, because just adding the color of rust doesn't give the same texture that actual rust has. So I used a mix of my rusty brown with some red and some orange, and then I put in some texture paste that I use on the base and then also on the bike itself to try and give an actual textured rust that I could then dry brush on top to give it more of an actual realistic feel. The painting is super straightforward. This is just a trial and error of making it as dirty as possible, and then having this as kind of the basis of the characters that I'm going to be sculpting later on. So at this point, the bike is looking pretty damn nice, if I do say so myself. I kept adding stuff on top. I couldn't leave this thing alone. The painting is the most fun for me. I didn't have the chance to film the sculpting process because it was kind of done over the years here and there without any actual plan of making it into a video. So you'll see me trying to clean up the colors again because it got dark once again because of all the washes. So a final little touch of blue, and then a dry brushing of silver over all the areas I wanted to feel that had been scratched up. And because this thing is so old, that is essentially the whole bike. If I were to do this thing all over again, I would have been a bit more purposeful with the paint job. Maybe have two different colors, have something a bit more purposeful feeling. This just felt like the whole thing was spray painted blue and then it was left to rot, which I guess fits the vibe of this sculpt. But in my future scratch building projects, I think I'd like to have a bit more of a purposeful sci-fi feel. So the famous dry brushing, and then a final little wash of a sandy yellow to try and tie everything together and give it a grimy feel. This is actually the part that actually made this thing feel a bit more like a realistic piece and less like a cartoony attempt at making something that looked gross. Maybe some of you can recognize some of the pieces I used on this. That, like I said, there's Lego pieces, but there's also the cap for an X-Acto knife on the back there. A shoe stink ball. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but I kind of just broke it in half and used the curved half curve on the back there next to the 2. The 2 is actually an upside down inverted 5 that I found on the gym floor that I assume fell off of a weight for a 45 pound. A final touch for the base there was just to add a little bit of grass and some dusty browns all over the piece with some pastels. With the bike itself finished, it was time to make the actual characters for the scene. I decided about halfway through to make goblins. Don't ask me why. I just for some reason thought that it would look good or funny with the scale of the bike. Originally, I decided I just wanted one. As time went on, I realized it just doesn't look right to have a single goblin sitting on it, and it would probably be funnier to have multiple. So I started out with a particular idea of like green goblins in my mind, but as I went on, they kind of turned into like the Harry Potter goblins from the movies. They kind of just turned into like a working class version of that. This is the Goblin mechanic, who I imagine is the goblin who built this bike. Don't ask me how with those long ass nails. I decided to give him kind of a relaxed pose. His face is just like the ultimate caricature of a goblin. The profile I'm particularly proud of by just bringing his nose all the way up between his eyebrows and giving him kind of a mean, grumpy look. It's kind of fun making these little characters. I don't have to care too much about the anatomy. All I really have to do is kind of have fun. And if it looks wonky, that's kind of the idea. So a lot of these were kind of like my daily warm-up sketches for the day. They kind of turned out really nice. This one is actually my favorite. I started out by just making the anatomy as best I could, and then eventually I started dressing him up in whatever I imagined a goblin mechanic would wear. There's definitely kind of like a retro vibe to this whole piece. So I put him in some jean overalls with just one jean strap, and I gave him kind of a dirty rag as well as a cigarette. And towards the end, I also decided I'd put a little cap on him just for fun. So the final step for this first goblin here was to paint him. The painting process was super easy. I decided to start off by just gluing him down to the actual bike first, because painting something that isn't on a base that you have to handle while you're painting it does lead to smudges, and it's just awkward in general. I decided to just start off with the skin, seeing as how it's kind of simple to just slap that on and then get the detail work over with afterwards. I went with a very tan look because this guy is obviously outside shirtless on a motorcycle, so I thought he'd definitely have a bit of sun to him. Kind of my cheat code to always use unprimed super Sculpey, the beige kind, and just put Crusader skin on top of that. Then it's all about base coats. Lately I've just been putting a basic bright color on everything and then putting speed paints on top of it or washes, just to give everything the basic look first and then add on top. So it is obviously too bright a blue for jeans. That brown is not very nice. It's actually quite a cheap acrylic that I bought a very long time ago. But speed paints add a texture that doesn't really matter what's underneath. Having just a basic color down is a huge help to me. I added some glossy black on his nails and then a glossy black on his eyes. So now I'm adding some little reddish pink details to his face. So that's his lips, his nose, his ears, his elbows, shoulders, and hands as well. Just anywhere where you would expect more blood flow or someone to just have kind of rosy skin. Usually that is the knuckles, the fingertips, the cheeks, and the nose. This is like the most satisfying part for me, is just adding a blue speed paint on top of that base color and then just seeing all of the texture come back out, and then adding a little bit of gold onto the buckles just to give it that extra pop. So painting is one of my favorite parts because all the work I put into the sculpting kind of comes to light. A good paint job job can really accentuate it, and a bad one can really ruin a sculpture. A brown leather speed paint on top of the cap. Once again, super satisfying to look at and very satisfying to do. The exact same speed paint except on the shoes, and because I use different browns, it looks like a different leather. That's why I'm such a big fan of base coats when using speed paints. Then it was just about dirtying him up a bit. He's a mechanic, right? He's not going to be sparkling and clean, so I had to put a little bit of black and brown all over him, and then some pigments on the boots. And the first guy was done, and I was super satisfied with the result, so much that I considered ending it there, but I decided against it. So this little guy is the second in this series. I decided to not do another one after this one. I thought I'd leave it up to you. Let me know if you want to see more goblins piled onto this bike. But I decided, with this second one, I'm gonna let the detail of the other one speak and go a little simpler on this one. So decided to put him in a welding mask and some big thick gloves. It was a lot of fun to make. Very straightforward, and as you can see in the back, I had another big project on the go, so it was again really fun to just kind of let loose with this one and not care too much about shape or details. And the painting process was exactly the same as the last one, and with the second one finished, it was time to see how the whole project looked. Finally over. For you eagle-eyed viewers, you might notice that his cigarette is missing. I don't know when that happened, but while editing the video, I realized it was gone. And I think it adds a little character to this very weird and impromptu piece. I hope you enjoyed it. I really appreciate you watching the video. Please let me know if you're interested in more of these more original projects. I'll see you next time.